How are you guys all doing tonight? You good? Yeah. I'm serious. Are you ready? I've been looking forward to this night. Mary O'Malley was born in Conemarra, the eldest of 10. Sabrina, I was talking with her a moment ago, and she said, "Oh, that's inconsequential," or something like that. And I actually don't think it is. I'm the oldest of 4, but it's a small tribe. But 10 is a pretty large group, and the eldest has a certain kind of pressure put on them, and many different pressures put on them. And I think somehow that plays into later life too, and that'll come up in a moment. She studied at the University College Galway, lived many years in Portugal before returning in the late 1980s. She's since published 8 collections of poetry, with her latest, Playing the Octopus, just out this past year. She's received a Henessey Award, a Lawrence O'Shaughnessy Award, taught at NUI Galway, held the chair of Irish Studies at Villanova University, and she writes and broadcasts regularly for RTE Radio while being active in environmental education. The voice in her poems, for me, is somehow inside and yet at a necessary remove, which is really tricky to do both of those. It's a voice of 2 worlds, a voice that has a keen humor tucked inside of it, and steady whether it's on land or submerged deep in the underworld. I think of Louise Glick, I think of Audrey Rich, whose voice I love dearly. And I hear in O'Malley the voice of the sage, a voice that is timeless, an earned voice, a voice of wisdom. She once said, "A language lives when it's remade and when the rules are broken as well as kept." And in her poems are proof of these assertions. I believe that language exists within a deep well that is far deeper than any of our individual lives. And O'Malley's pen delivers to us, poem by poem, water from that deep and sacred well. Mary O'Malley.
Hi, it's a great pleasure to be back in Cork. It's always a delight to come to Cork, but a particular one to be at this festival. It's probably the best organised festival I've been at in a very long time. Seamless and relaxed. Thank you to Pat Cotter and his team. I remember Pat coming up to Galway way back when I was involved with Cúirt, to a lot of reading, coming up year after year for readings even then. And when you have somebody at the helm of a festival who really knows their poetry and is himself a poet, it's lovely to be here. I'll start with a little poem in Irish. I won't give you a translation because anyone, except to say that it takes its title from this awful announcement that you have to listen to on the train to Galway from Dublin anyway, and I'm sure on the train to Cork, called Seachan an Bharna, and this fellow says it with great relish about every 5 minutes, and it means just mind the gap. Seachan an Bharna, idir an idirlín agus an chrí, idir na réalacha agus an dlí, idir an deontas agus an ghaí, idir gaile agus blau clí. Seachan an Bharna, idir cuasaí muir agus cuasaí trá, idir an grúam agus an rá, idir teach agus baile, idir lucht d'aibre agus lucht na sráide, idir doras oscailte agus doras glasta, idir síl na carrach agus síl an clada, idir an saoirse agus an gafa. So it's just a list poem, really, a poem of lists of things to watch out for. And when you're writing, I was very interested because I know we have Slavic and poets from all over Europe here, as well as various other places. But I've been reading Adam Zadiewski's essays and a defense of Ardor, which is a wonderful essay. Book. He's talking at one point, he's writing about Herbert, the poet Herbert, who is one of my favourite poets ever, probably. And he talks about people who chose to write in Polish, and in his own case, why he was writing in Polish and not in French or in English, which he speaks well, assuming, as he said, that he could. And he referred to a letter by Shaw about the Irish writing in English, which Shaw said, after all, saying to some poor Polish writer, why didn't he write in Russian? After all, he said it worked for the Irish. They had English imposed on them and it worked wonderfully. Well, not always. And we have our revenge occasionally by wrecking the language. I want to read a little poem for Philip Casey. I'm only reading this, it's very short, because Philip loved it. He had a great sense of humour. We once spent a whole weekend judging a competition, and we were so demented by the end of it after reading something like 1,000 poems. There were about 4 of us involved, that we invented the Sun Literary Supplement. And the Sun Literary Supplement was invented because a poet, possibly in this room, was referred to for the first time ever, as far as we know, that a poet was referred to in the Sun newspaper. And it said, Irish poet admits he hasn't written a word in 6 months, or something like that. So we were interviewing the chambermaids at Ennimacarrig, and so on. Sadly, we never published it. We never did it. We should do it sometime, some of us, in Philip's memory. This is called Mercy. We got our Christianity from Egypt, not Rome, but the Pope won. So all the convent girls sing, oh, 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 de bello, bello, gallico. I mean, imagine us, 40 of us, convent girls, and the text we had for our leaving cert was de bello gallico, Caesar's War, which wouldn't pass nowadays in terms of relevance. I'm going to read a couple of new poems. I've gone back to writing a sequence of Persephone poems, so these are mostly in the voice of Persephone, or referring to Persephone going into the underworld, or trying to rescue her daughter in Persephone and Demeter, and that bargain really that we make with life, that myth refers to. The pomegranate, where I come from, was referred to as the wine apple, and was of course eaten in November for Samhain, for All Souls. Mask. She closes the front door and steps into the car, cold, erratic, Nubian. Her face shut tight is hard and beautiful. Pain has sludged in charred circles under her eyes. Words crack like ice. Some snake has sucked the sweetness from her voice and the joy from her lovely face. House. It stands upright with an air not of abandonment exactly, more of a woman waiting for her daughter to come through the gate, a mother flayed of expectation. Time drags its walls downward. This does not show except in unguarded moments. Evenings when it sags inwards, its many eyes darkened with rain. The roof slumps over the eaves like tired hair. The house once so little, the squeak of a gate opening, the girl's face shining on the path. Let me tell you something about houses. They too are spancelled to the past. Question. When you have gone so low that you would bend down and pull grass with your bare fingers, bow your head into the winter muck to dull what cannot be born, surely it is time to look up from the ruins of this future and ask, were they in on this from the start, the weird sisters? Were they sitting on your cradle, pitching curses down the line like frogs, switches that would flick on and administer shots of wasp venom with a 3-in-1? And if they were, where is the godmother with the antidote to rhyme a cure and weave out of smashed glass and torn dresses a bridge of sorts that you could walk across and reach above the festering fog with hyacinths and roses? Room 1. I can see your hair on the pillow, a cat's marmalade face beside your own, black and orange under the moon. Useless to ask how the thread snapped, or who will repair such a delicate thing, or when the dark shiver of your roots will uncoil in whatever night holds it there. Only the night knows the light's path through the spiralling stream of your hair, and the woman with the needle and thread sitting invisibly there by your bed. Descent. I have looked for you among the Greeks, where hate and love are close as blood, and blood is worth so much and no more. I went down among the Greeks reluctantly, not trusting in cheap plunder, but there is no more time. Threads have been pulled. Time woven, knotted, snipped. I went to the cities and the far islands and met statues, women with blind eyes and no mercy. In temples and bars and houses everywhere, I saw your likeness, and everywhere women with their bored gaze fixed beyond me on some blue island with dolphins, an olive tree, the dangerous bull in his maze, and the woman who holds the thread. None of them spoke to me, just one more crazed mother searching for her daughter. They're used to that here. Vigil. I have paid the coin time has extracted, with another in my mouth for the shroud, a willing deposit for when you are found. I will stand in the helical stream with the wind scorching my ankles until someone looks up and says bargain, and then I will go down to meet her and bring the small red seeds of the sun to remind her of home. I will stand there until the dark breaks open. And this is a poem called Little Dazzler. My cousin, who was far too young and has 3 little boys, died of cancer, and on the day of her funeral, after what they call a long battle, and on the day of her funeral I was going down in October, late October, early November, and I saw, it was out near Armstrong, and I saw what I thought were snowdrops. They looked exactly like them, but it was, of course, wild garlic. But anyway, the poem, nevertheless, is about the snowdrop and the wild garlic, who possibly are roughly related to them, but in the same family, and the Odysseus magical charm, Moly, was of that family, depending on which classical hairs you split. Little Dazzler. There are limits to the thing itself. Too many condoms, smartphones, blood can turn into blocks of wood, everyday words playing dead. Take that snowdrop, the white head bent among a tangle of dead time, a supermodel in a green tube dress. Odysseus's charm against the sorceress should be yesterday's news, but holy moly, she still dazzles. I come, as was said, I think, from a part of Ireland called Conemarra, which is expanding by the moment, according to the Tourist Board. It's expanded way beyond the reach it had when I was a child. It is the only Irish territory to be expanding, as far as I know. I've read a lot about it in articles and newspapers and travel articles and so on. It's this wonderful place, I can tell you now. Absolutely fantastic. Romantic, wild. They all say it's wild. I wish they would stop. My father was a fisherman, so I could tell them a thing or two about wild, out in boats and so on. However, several years back it became fashionable during the famous Celtic Tiger phase, before it all went boom. And now it's all coming back, no doubt, to go boom again. There was a lot of snide references to people who were closer to Boston than Berlin, Well, Boston is literally the next parish for us, as it is for a lot of Cork people. And America, we were not uncritical of America, but there was a strong bond as well, as there was indeed to Europe. Anyway, this is a poem written at that time called Geography. I should say that this wonderful place that I read about all the time is a place I've never been to. But someday I'd love to go. Conemarra has one language, two tongues. It is knowing everyone's fault but your own. It is never pulling together except in trouble and then uniting. It is not a brand name. It is not a postcard nor a map. It is not a cottage, it is a house. A small house with the windows blocked in. It is every word and footprint of the people that came from it. It is not the €1 million cheque the cement merchant bought it with. It is Elephant John and the pastime and the streets of Cricklewood. It is Graceland and cowboys, Indians and guitars. It is South Boston and East Berlin. It is Shane McGowan's drug tank and a girl in a tile shop in Galway saying, "You have the Fógin Wada." It is being born Fuidriach na Farige. It is not a private beach, it is a strand. It is in South Boston and Levinsing. It is a state of mind, and in the mind it lives and will stay alive in the feet of its dancers, in the mouths of its two-tongued poets, in their broken language, in the arms of its singers, in the pure notes of its singers. It is held carefully as an ornament, o veil go bail, o ort go hot, o sasna go rasavil, o scairds imagine go baras nitsaniha, go make she shinche cuiha, mar oran allin sanev. So that's Conemarra. It talks about its singers, the Shannon singer, the old style form of singing, because that is, I suppose, most particularly the form, although we have a lot of musicians and dancers, it is Shannos that is the particular, interestingly, the particular form, I think, which gives voice to the place. Some might argue about that, but anyway. I'm sure they would, since we're an argumentative crowd. This is called Playing the Octopus, and I think I'll read the title poem first because for Brian Burke the painter, because it explains why it's called Playing the Octopus. But the poem is called Uilleann, which means elbow, after the uilleann pipes. I work with musicians very regularly. People sometimes get drunk on the music. One early morning after the night before, not having finished, the story goes that when a baby started crying, his father picked him up, tucked his bellows under his elbow and started playing him, along with 2 fiddles, a tin whistle and the piper who tuned into the baby's cries for the walls of Limerick. When the baby, sick of the noise, stopped, they were halfway through Shoe the Donkey, and seeing that it did no harm, swung into a storm of jigs, the baby squawking, saddle the pony. That boy is a slave now, to fiddle, harp, melodeon. Somehow in all those tunes he has learned to listen for his own note. He lives on inland water, where sound, whether the listener hears or not, is magnified and separate and moves over the air like a sky goat's bleat. He avoids the pipes. He has his reasons. He has heard the story of the octopus who was locked into a room for a week to practice. When they let him out, the pipes had learned to play the octopus. The thing about musicians is they respond to glory. I was out with the crowd. I fell into bad company last night. My friend John was home from Paris, so I might read this for him, and Lidus O'Leary was in the company, the singer, so I'll read it for them. It's called Tory, the island of Tory, which has lost its boat. So I won't even begin to tell you the talk about the Queen of Ireland and the King of Tory and so on. The boat is called the Queen of Ireland, and she failed the regulations. I'm not sure why. And this is very serious. Joking aside, if you live on an island, it's a dreadful thing, very terribly serious thing to have. This is written after the singing of Lilla Solera, and he has a a book called On a Rock in the Middle of the Ocean about the songs of Tory Island. And but it's also about the image. The central image in it is a wonderful painting that my friend Vivian Dick has from the Tory painters. I think it's Patsy Dan painting of called The Ship of Fools, and it's just an ordinary trawler with a cron in Irish is the mast, and this is actually a tree sticking up out of the boat, two of them, and across it a string of carnival bulbs. It's wonderful. We'll take off for Tory in the ship of fools, with the mast half-cotched spools of carnival bulbs lit. Rory, Rory at the helm, your only man in a storm. Tory has the mandate of song. On a rock in the middle of the ocean we'll mock dead autumn and sing through the worst winter can throw at us. Put a sock in the laments. Bodgy Nailamy will take us to Tory. We'll be sure of a welcome if we keep in tune. There's a king and a lifeboat. There's a dog that swims with a dolphin. The Republic of Tory is what's left. I was looking around to see what was left of the Republic at the time when I was writing these. Not a lot at the time. Things are probably looking up. What Ireland needs. This was after the playing of Mel Mercier with the Bones. What Ireland needs, excuse me, is not more money men or oil companies. She does not need more laboratories, administrators or doctors. She does not need more lawyers or offices or post office boxes or chairs of funny business in universities. She does not need more inspectors of prisons, septic tanks, drains, nor more giant windmills to subdue Connacht and annex Spain. What Ireland needs in every government department is an incredible dancing man to play the bones for civil servants, secretaries, nurses, number crunchers, on his thighs, his wrists, his jiggling hips, on their clavicles and elbows, all along the old trapezium, down across their rude computers, up their mandibles and sternums with a flourish of the skeletons. A wild, whirly man to put a pep in their step and teach them what's what, and in homage to Yeats and Aristotle, beat the taws upon their bottoms. How much time have I got? I want to read a couple of animal poems, but I'll start with the ghost chant. I was interested listening earlier to the reading about mention of the First Nation, and when I was over in Villanova, it was the first time I love Philadelphia, I've been there a lot, but a fair bit, but I didn't really know that landscape at all, and I hadn't spent real time there, and I couldn't get any access to it. It's very flat and very different. And I kept asking, what was the Indian name for this, and what was the Indian, or the native name for that? And this is really part of my trying to make sense out of the place. Perhaps I'll read natives first. English is making strange again, contrary as a 2-year silence. Irish sticks its tongue out in hard, necessary syllables that spit and hiss, and consonants like shards of nice. English is not the tool for this, but English is what I have. This is no way to map this frozen place, the sharp light, cars like barges, the flat, lean grant of William Penn's tame share, rearing suddenly up 100 floors vertical, but mapping is not what I am at. Not sapping, but naming, where is the voice of the Indian? I hear it in the wind, feel it flense the skin, strip the wires, buckle the ground under the asphalt, the howl of America grown distant, the tense ghosts and street corner faces. A fox cried last night outside our window for a mate, for food, for the native, for no. Which takes, of course, its echo of Kieran Carson's The Irish for No. The ghost chant. What it is to be a people. I started really thinking for the, I mean, I've often thought it intellectually, but this was really wondering how it could have been to have a country taken over that way. What it is to be a people that lived so lightly on the land, their own families named each of them for the simple traits they carried or would inherit as gifts upon becoming grown, to grow up young. What it must be to lose an entire continent to men who traded in baubles and lies, who flourished under false names and then see your trails cobwebbed in the moonlight, pale, crossed by ghost caravans. They were stitched between mountains across the river we call Delaware. Night raiders, ghost encampments. What I am hunting is the syllables of old names. I hear their echoes in the chant, electrifying the body, drumming, singing the wolf's story. I really mean it. What time am I over?
What time is it now?
It's my watch says it's 25 to.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Patricia Smith is the author of 8 poetry collections also, including her most recent Incendiary Art, winner of the 2018 NAACP Image Award, finalist for the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. Her previous collection, Shoulda Been Jimi Savannah, won the Lenore Marshall Prize from the Academy of American Poets. Before that, she was a National Book Award finalist for Blood Dazzler. Her nonfiction book, Africans in America, America's Journey Through Slavery, is a companion to the award-winning PBS television series. Her poems and essays have appeared in Poetry, the New York Times, Paris Review, the Washington Post. She is a Guggenheim Fellow, a Civitelian, a finalist for the Neustadt Prize, and she's been awarded a National Endowment for the Arts grant. She's a professor of poetry, and she's read her work and taught writers from Japan to Europe and across the United States. She is, without a doubt, one of the great voices of our time, which is difficult to say in a room full of poets. You know? I know, right? It's like Murderer's Row times every row in here. You know? So I say that with, because with great respect to all of us in the room. But there's a wonderful voice about to come up. And the two tonight is such a phenomenal pairing.
We are.
Yeah, right? There's an amazing wave, there's a new wave of writers coming up. And you can name from Ocean Vuong, to Calling a Wolf a Wolf. Check out that book, right? Right? We can do some snaps. We can do. It's on the page. It's in the air. There's a wave it's already adding its signature to our time, and it's young. It's going to add for decades. And this is fantastic. But we already have a wave of great poets that I don't think gets the attention that it deserves. Patricia Smith's ear is tuned to the instrument of the poem. Her heart is tuned to what must be said. Her imagination is tuned to the stories of our time. I recognize in her poetry the language of a war-torn landscape. At the heart of it, loss, love, pain, beauty, America. We are inundated with journalism, but this is the news. This is the world we live in. These are the poems of Patricia Smith.
absolutely amazing. Thank you. I was like, is she here? I would like to thank Brian, Patrick, who all had a little bit of a part of me being here. But what's been so special is the broadening of community, being introduced to such stellar voices and making so many new friends. It's so good to come up here, turn around and see, like, I know half these people. This is fantastic. So anytime, just whistle. I'll come back. That was a cheap ploy, wasn't it? For John Coltrane, I always shudder when I pray. Mama say the Lord enters you in stages, first like a lit match under your skin, then like an animal biting through bone with soft teeth. I always shudder when I pray, so your name must be a prayer. Saying your name colors my mouth, frees loose this river, changes my skin, turns my spine to string. I pray all the time now. Amen. Try not to touch me while I tell this. Try not to brush the thick tips of your fingers against my throat while my throat moves, telling the story. Don't suddenly squeeze my bare shoulders or travel your mouth along the flat swell of my belly. Whatever you do, don't bite at the hollow in my back, whisper touch my ankles, or match our skin like spoons. Don't punctuate this rambling sentence with your tongue or trace your name on the backs of my legs, please. Don't walk the question of your breath along my thighs or draw a map on my quivering breastbone guiding me to you, me to you, me to you, me to you. Do not play me that way. Don't play me that way. The way the sax man plays his lady, blown into her mouth until she cries, allowing her no breath of her own. Don't play me that way, baby, the way the sax man plays his lady, that strangling, soft murder, notes like bullets, riffs like knives, and the downbeat slapping into her, and she sighs, into her, and she cries, into her, and she whines like the night turning. Just let me sit here on the bar stool, sipping something bitter. Let me cross my legs, slow, like the colored girls do, and let me feel your eyes go there. Let me feed on glory and grow fat. Meanwhile, lover, let's fill this wicked church with music. Let me lean to the song for once without your mouth on me. The music lit match under my skin, and I dance. All legs and thunderous and heels too high. I dance cheap perfume and black nail polish. Sharkskin congregation, heads pressed, attitudes too tight. Won't scream until it gets to be too much. Won't beg for mercy until I wreck the landscape with my hips. Barstool's filling. Everybody's waiting for the glory to move through me. Rock me with hosannas, shake me with hallelujahs to break these bored bones. They wait for you, supreme love, to pull me out onto the dance floor, whisper come-ons in my ear, make me kick my heels above my head, high heels above my nappy head, while they wait. I will dance with the sax man. I will shimmer as he presses my keys. Hear me, Boston, we are wicked church, so do not play. Did you hear me tell you do not play me that way, the way I pray to be played? Mama say the Lord enters you in stages. Play me that way. First like a lit match under my skin, play me that way. Then like an animal biting through bone with soft teeth, play me. Mama say lie still and wait for glory, that way. To consume me, that way. Work my keys, that way. Work my keys, that way. Work my keys. Wait a minute, come around here and press that key twice. That felt kind of good. Let me just... Don't pay me no mind, lover. I always shudder when I pray. All right, so I teach writing. I teach at a school. There are a lot of first-generation students, and so they they like to write love poems. And obviously the big deal in love poems nowadays is not being texted back. That was, the hearts break all the time. The unreturned text is a big deal. So I have to trick them into writing other things. So one day we were going to have a final, and I come in and their shoulders are all slumped. It's the poetry final. They're like, and I said, good news, no final. Hey! They carried me around the room on their shoulders, And I said, but I have another thing I want you to do. I asked them what their most difficult age was. So, anybody, what was your most difficult age? 14.
16.
33.
16. It's like yesterday. 33, 13, 16.
20.
20. My kids' consensus was 13. Now you think about 13. 13 is kind of universally miserable. Like if you have skin and you're 13, something's wrong with it. Or this whole nether region thing you don't understand. So I said, here's your new final. I want you to write me a poem about being 13. I want it to be 13 stanzas, 13 lines each stanza, 13 syllables each line. Don't you wish you were in my class? So I don't do anything unless, I don't assign them anything unless I do it too. So my 13 was kind of different from theirs, but I'm not going to read all 13 of them, I'm just going to read a few of them. 13 ways of being 13. 1. You touch your forefinger to the fat clots in the blood, then lift its iron stench to look close, searching the globs of black scarlet for the dimming swirl of dead children. You thread one thick pad's cottony tail, then the other through the little steel guides of the belt. You stand and lift the contraption, press your thighs close to adjust the bulk, then bend to pull up coarse white cotton panties bleached blue, and, just to be safe, you pin the bottom of the pad to the shredding crotch of the Carters. Like women my age are like, oh my God. Then you spritz the guilty air with the cloying kiss of FDS. It's time to begin the game of justifying ache. Time to name the mystery prickling that's riding your skin. You're convinced the boys can smell you, and they can. 2. Right now, this Tuesday in July, nothing's headier than the words sheen, manageable, bounce. Squinting into the smeared mirror, you search your head for them. You probe with greased fingers, spreading paths in the chaos wide enough for the advertised glimmer to escape, but your snarls hold tight to their woven dry confounding. Fevered strands snap under the drag of the wiry brush, and order unfurls, while down the hall, Mama rotates the hot comb in a bleary blaze and smacks her joyful gum. Still, TV bellows its promise. You witness the pink snap of the perfect neck, hear the impossible vow. Shampoo with this, sheen, bounce. Her corn silk head is gospel. It's so true. Come here, child. Even your mother's calling you burns. 3. Miss Stein scribbled a word on the blackboard, said, who can pronounce this? And the word was anemone. And from that moment, you first felt the clutter of possible in your mouth. From the time you stumbled through the rhythm and she slow smiled, you suddenly knew you had the right to be explosive, to sling syllables through back doors, to make up your own damn words if you needed them. All that day, sweet anemone tangled in your teeth, spurted sugar tongue, led you to the dictionary where you were assured that it still existed, to the cave of the bathroom where you warbled it in bounce echo, and finally, convinced that you own that teeny gospel, you wrote it again and again and again and 4. Trying hard to turn hips to slivers, sway to stutter. You walk past the Sinclair station, where lanky boys, dust in their hair, dressed in their uniforms of oil and thud, rename you pussy with their eyes. They bring sound, shudder, and blue from their throats just for you. Serve up ancient sonata of skin drum and conch shell. Sing suggesting woos of AM radio. Boom, boom! How you just gonna walk on by like that? And suddenly you know why you are stitched so tight, crammed like a flash bomb into pinafore, obeying your mama's instructions to be a baby as long as you can. Because it's a man's world, and James Brown is gasoline, the other side of slow zippers. He is all of it. The pump, pump, the growled, please, please, please. 8. In the bathroom of the what-not joint on the way to school, you get rid of the starch and billowed lace, barrettes taming unraveling braids, white knee socks, and sensible hues. From a plastic bag, you pull out electric blue eyeshadow, platforms with silver glittered heels, neon fishnets, and a blouse that doesn't so much button as suggest shut. The transformation takes 5 minutes, and you emerge feeling like a budding lady, but looking, in retrospect, like a blind streetwalker bursting from a cocoon. This is what television does. Turns your mother into clueless backdrop, fills your pressed head with the probability of thrum. Your body becomes just not yours anymore. It's a dumb little marquee. 9. With your bedroom door closed, you are skyscraper bouffant, peach foundation and eyelashes like upturned claws. You are exuding ice. You are pinched all over by earrings. You are way too much woman for this room. The audience has one chest, a single shared chance to gasp. They shudder, heave, waiting for you to open your mouth and break their hearts. Taking the stage, you become an S, pour ache into hip swings. Tisk tisk as the front row collapses. Damn, they want you. You lift the microphone. Something illegal comes out of you, a sound like titties and oil. Mama flings the door open with a church version of your name. Then you are pimpled, sexless, ashed, and double Dutch knees. You are spindles. You are singing into a hairbrush. 13. You're about 14. And you think you're ready to push beyond the brutal wisdoms of the 1 and the 3, but some nagging crave in you doesn't want to let go. You suspect that you will never be this unfinished, all Hail Mary and precipice, stuttering sachet, fuses in your swollen chest suddenly lit and spitting, and you'll need to give your hips a name for what they did while you weren't there. You'll miss the pervasive fever that signals blooming, the sore lessons of jump rope in your calves. This is the last year your father is allowed to touch you. Sighing, you push Barbie's perfect body through the thick dust of a top shelf. There, her prideful heart thunders. She has hardened you well. She has taught you everything. Okay, I am going to read kind of a long sequence, and I think I'm going to finish with that. I'm always telling my students to listen for the voices they're not hearing. And in the States, it's no secret to anyone, we are an unapologetic culture of violence. There were a number of African American men and women who were losing their lives, many times at the hands of the police, but not always. And the voice that I wasn't hearing when I was looking at that pattern, I would not hear the mother's voice. The mother, you see the mother twice. Once when they came to say, your child is dead. So you see them in the heat of this chaos. And then you see them again when the person responsible for the death of their child is deemed not responsible for the death of their child. And then they go away. They go away. We don't follow them into their lives. No one really wonders, what step that they take back into their lives after this. And so I wanted to write a sequence that had the mother at heart. And then I go into a couple of the cases and write from the mother's point of view. So this will be the last sequence. It's called Saga of the Accidental Saint. I don't expect you'll recognize my voice. I don't believe this saga I've suppressed will even sound familiar. I am just a stooped and accidental saint, no choice except to strain the limits of my throat. I am the mama weep beneath the fold, that paragraph you skip, the wink of gold inside a rotted mouth, that shredding note of grief. Excuse what's inexcusable in me. The shifting wildfire-tinted weave, my ankles blue with fluid, how I grieve in gospel you can't clutch. A fusible display of double negatives I spew whenever someone says my child is gone, and then goes on to pile the blame upon my child for being gone. Or maybe you believe the wretched mess is rightly traced right back to me, whose body housed the crime. My daughter, out of dollars, out of time, my son just seeking ways to be erased. So many ways they stride into the line of gunfire, tease the trigger, crave the shot, just living through their days as if they're not about to die. He totes a paper bag of wine, or tussles laughing with his kid, or rolls a joint, or asks his boo to braid his hair while lazing on the stoop, or dares to glare when someone shoves. She fights against the holes around her throat, or somehow looks the same as someone else, or sits inside her car or someone else's car, or leaves ajar a door she should have closed. He plays a game of hoops to clear his head, or doesn't raise his hands, or raises them, or doesn't stop, or does, or when commanded fails to drop his wallet, keys, or phone. He sets ablaze a heap of trash, somebody's car or store, while shouting slogans meant to make you care that he's alive. She's killed if she's not there, although she said she'd be, or there before she should have been, or on her way to work or coming home, not walking like she should, not walking down the street she normally would. He walks too close behind. You have to jerk your purse out of his way. You palm the mace. He passes, spitting lyric, vile and blue, not giving damns that he's offending you. All you can remember is his race. You ask him to succumb. He dares to climb. The situation quickly falls apart. A weapon's raised to line up with his heart because he feels entitled to his spine. She fumbles in her pocket for some change, or jumps the A-train turnstile on a dare. She mumbles like her mind is not all there, or titters in a way you think is strange. He wrecks his Chevy, waits for help. He calls the 9, the 1. He's waiting wrong. The folks around him said he didn't belong. He coughs or sneezes, looks away. He brawls with brothers, sisters, father, wife. He waves a Walmart toy, or he can't find his place in line. He laughs too loud. He can't retrace his steps. He droops his pants. He misbehaves. She turns her back or whirls around, or could be packing, could be wanted, could be strong enough to snap your neck. She moves all wrong. He wanders into someone else's hood in colors that he struggles to explain. He prances, strides, he's plotting an escape. He stops and spins on you. He's here to rape your daughter. Or he scoffs when you complain about the smell. He crafts a sign. He parks behind your Chevy, thrusts his massive fist into or through the air. He wakes up pissed but right on time, then smokes a blunt or arcs his brow when someone asks, "You good?" He waits his turn or takes a break. He takes a leak. He frightens everyone with his physique. The situation's bound to escalate. So many ways they're asking not to be. She's wearing out her welcome being black when no one asked her to. You've seen her lack of grace, the space she occupies, her glee when chicken, weed, or welfare checks roll in. He goes to class. He graduates. He takes the seat right next to you. His shoulder makes you quake inside. You simply don't know when he'll blow. She shops beneath the winking eye of video, but then pays with a card that can't be hers. His chest and arms are scarred with scrape and blood tattoos, so why untie the new shape like his neck? His clothes are blue or red. He wants your job. He scoped your wife. He craves your home, your cash, your perfect life. That textbook in his hand's not fooling you. She hawks and spits. She begs for change. She blows a heart. She blows through blows. She blows her chance. A victim, yet again, of circumstance. He's fighting back, but everybody knows that he's too coarse, too dumb, too street, too black, too dense, too doomed, too thick, too much of those, too vicious pose, too quick to come to blows, too likely he could spark your heart attack. He flares his nostrils, hides his hands. He flees without explaining why. She lifts, she steals, she swipes, she grabs, she snatches, cuts a deal. He stumbles, trips, he trips a wire. He sees too much, she needs too much, he feels too much. Her skin's too mud, his skin's too light. He fights too dirty, fights for breath. The savage nights are huge with him, the voodoo in his touch. He shoots himself while handcuffed to a pole, or hangs himself while hanging from a tree, or wrings his neck although his hands aren't free. He always seems to fail at self-control. He's monster, ogre, or he's a looming threat, insisting he didn't do the thing he did, denying that she'd hidden what she hid, confusing you by getting so upset. He claims he's innocent. He files a case. He lives too large, too long. He must believe that he is white or free. He's so naive. With every step he takes, he falls from grace. He steps inside her out or through her down. She bellows, jumps or hisses, struts or spins. He stalks a street, steps off a curb. His sin should be enough to drive him out of town, where he'd be out of sight and out of mind and out of bounds, but thankfully, not out of range. And if you think he's all about the kill, the drops, the guns and gangster grind, you know for sure as soon as you see me, his mama, wailing ugly, talking about my child, and plucking Jesus out of every bag. You just can't see why he deserves such stupid love. My wailing thrust, each Lord have mercy on my baby's soul, my sad theatrics as my child goes cold, and then the hungry cameras readjust my howls until it's not my child who's dead, but something feral, edged in leek, a threat to shrubbery and Sundays. While he's wet and seeping into street, they frame his head and mine inside a single shot and ask my nappy hair and bulging eyes just what I think. I keen, implode on cue. They cut the camera back to frame the blooded mask and splay. You don't remember what I say or hear his name, but you are borderline obsessed with my collapse, my crumpled wine and holy ghosted flail, the matinee of mama. You are entertained until you aren't, and then I'm just an open maw, a blur and tongue. You shouldn't waste your awe on my unleashed display of overkill. Ignore the blackish bruiser dripping bile, the spittle spewing me, still bellowing, my Lord, why would you let this thing disrupt your day? I disappear, and while I'm relegated to an anecdote on way to nothing, all you can recall is sputtered gospel woe in Carterwall. That corpse, the tightened wire behind my throat. That's my son collapsed there. My son crumpled there, my son lying there, my son positioned there, my daughter repositioned there, my daughter as exhibit A there, my daughter dumped over there, my son hidden away there, my son blue there, my son dangling there, my son caged there, my daughter on the gurney there, on the slab there, in the drawer there, my daughter splayed there, my son locked down there, my son hanging there, my son bleeding out there, my son growing frigid there, my daughter deposited there, my son inside the chalk there, my daughter being bagged there, my son on the slab there, my son crushed there, my son rearranged there, my son crumpled in the door there, my daughter's neck shrinking in the noose there, my son's left eye over there, my son as exhibit B there, my son behind the wheel there, my son under the wheels there, my son slumped over the wheel there, my son, my daughter, blooded and not moving in the doorway, on the stoop, down the block in front of her kids, just inside the barber shop, face down in the street, outside the bodega, inside the bodega, in the back alley behind the bodega, on the videotape a block from home, leaving home, hanging out at home, in the schoolyard, on the blacktop, in his bed, in her kitchen, in my arms, in my arms, in my arms. That's my son, shot to look thug. That's my daughter, shot to look more animal, shot as kill, shot as prey, shot as conquest, shot as solution, shot as lesson, shot as warning, shot as comeback, shot as payback, shot for sport, shot for history. That's my son not being alive anymore there. That's my child coming to rest one layer below the surface of the rest of my life there. the end of the sequence. March 3rd, 2014, Iberia Parish, Louisiana. Police say that Victor White III, 22, shot himself while handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser. November 19, 2013, Durham, North Carolina. Police say that Jesus Herrera, 17, shot himself while handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser. July 29, 2012, Jonesboro, Arkansas. Police say that Chavis Carter, 21, shot himself while handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser. He reached back and found his own hands with his own hands, worked his bound fingers to set his free fingers loose, then used that shackled hand to free the other shackled hand, and the free shackled hand, still shackled, was still bound to the other hand once both were free. Once free in the shackled hand turned to the matter of the gun, which couldn't be there because they'd searched my baby twice. And a gun is a pretty big thing unless it isn't, unless it is dreamed alive by hands that believe they are no longer shackled. Stunned in cuffs, but free and searching, the left and right hands found a gun with a stink like voodoo, a gun that couldn't have been there, wasn't there, but was. The left-handed him used a cuffed hand, which could have either been left or right since both were free, to root around for a trigger and fire a bullet right into his left-handed head. Impossible, but not really, since the preferred killing hand may have preferred its shackles. The policeman, who had searched my baby twice and cuffed both his free and unfree hands behind his back before his hands found his own hands and pulled, heard no human sound at all during all that frantic magic. No fuck as my boy struggled to get his left shackled hand to do what his right shackled hand wouldn't do. No frenzied pound of one bracing foot against the door. No grunt or whoop of glee to mark all those times he slipped out of custody and in again. But they did hear the bang of the gun, the one that wasn't there but was, the bang it made when it sent that bullet into the right side of his left-handed head. Sounds like sacrifice, they thought. Slumped, eyes cocked and undone, my child was amazed at the sweet hoodoo he had managed. Both left and right hands were shackled and free behind him. There was an eerie, perfect circle of smoke in his hair. Suicide, they both said at the very same time, and since it was odd how they had reached the same conclusion, they smiled and shook their heads. Noting the shackles, they praised their God in the light of miracle, while the boy who couldn't have done what he did, but did, bled down to nothing. Guess he couldn't take it, one of the alive said to the other. He didn't mean wearing the shackles. He meant not wearing them. One more. Oh, and I'm going to skip to the, because I think I'm going over my time. Okay. September 14, 2013, Bradfield Farms, North Carolina. After being involved in a traffic accident, Jonathan Farrell, 24, knocked on the door of a nearby house for help. The woman inside called the police. They arrived and shot him 10 times. My son said, "I just had an accident. I need to use the phone." She said, "You're black." My son said, "It'll only take a minute. I need to call the police." She heard, "Call the police." My son said, I know it's late, but I just had an accident." She said, 911. He said, "Okay then, you'll call 911? She said, "You're black." The police said, "Is he black?" She said, "He's black." When the gun arrived, it said, "I just had an accident." The gun 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 said, Thank you.
So, can you all hear me?
Yep.
I'm just gonna maybe ask one or maybe two questions, but I'd really like to open up to you. But I'll start with this question, which, well, give me a second. I think, you know, when I read both of your poems, I feel like I'm in the process, I am in the process of learning about my own life and the world. But I'm wondering about, for you, when the poems you've written, what are you learning from your own work? Does that make sense?
Well, you know, I think at some stage every poet has to ask the question. You have to ask yourself why you're writing. I mean, there's some people I know and love and they write, and it's a recreational exercise for them. And at one point I realized if there was no opportunity to get published or no audiences anywhere, that I'd still have to write. And that's when I realized I'm kind of writing to move myself sanely from day to day. There's some poems I write and I read and no one ever sees them, you know, so it's my way of kind of make sense of the world. So once I read that Toni Morrison said that all of her novels, she started them with a question, and when she started the novel, she did not know the answer to the question, and the whole novel was an exploration. And I think to root myself in this world, and it's a world that's so insane in so many ways, that I have to center myself. And my poems say, I might not come to an answer, but at least I've explored kind of all aspects of things that affect me. And also a big part of that is reading everyone else. I mean, this is one big picture. And my side of it is just so I can wake up tomorrow and feel like I have some purpose and direction in the world, but then someone else who's maybe living a parallel life. And that's why I love traveling so much like this, is like I hear poets and go, there's my sister, there's my brother, you know. And that, so I'm not only kind of trying to teach myself how to move through the world as an artist and a woman and a black woman and all that, but I'm also trying to broaden what my idea of community is, the creative community, and also so we can kind of bolster each other.
I mean, I think I probably learn more from reading, you know, from reading while I'm writing and before I'm writing, and also about what I'm not writing or discarding, to tell you the truth, because by the time the poem is there, it's there, and there's nothing to, you know, maybe somebody else can find something in it, but I'm finished with it. To be frank, once it's really finished with, I mean, and given out, which takes often quite a long time. But in a broader sense, I do write. One does write to make sense of the world, I think, and in part, and also all I learn is how much people knew long before me, more and more, frankly, you know, and how much I don't know. That's truly outstanding. That's something added to all the time. I'm part of education, I think. But as to reading my own work and finding anything, no, occasionally I read poems from when I was much younger and I think, that wasn't as bad as I thought. That's usually as far as I go.
You know, when I said earlier that it was an inspired pairing, partly that was because both of you mentioned music and you collaborate with music. But I was wondering if both of you could talk about, it seems like music is one of the sources that starts, it seems to almost come before the story in some ways. I've heard you talk about it a little bit in interviews, and we've talked about this.
Well, my revision process is very heavily narrative driven, so I try to make sure the story I want to tell is there. In my first revision process, I go in and I revise for music. I got introduced to poetry by getting up on stage and doing it, so the sound is always very important to me. I always assume you have one time to listen to the poem. If I'm reading about something that you want to avoid in a narrative sense, like if it's something that's emotionally difficult for you to listen to, I want the music to draw you in. I want something there, so you hopefully can't turn away from the poem. Also, I have this I grew up an only child. I have this really strange musical memory. Like, if you put on an oldie station in the States, a lot of songs I'm not supposed to know, I know. And so it's like I hooked into lyrics and looked at songwriters and storytellers right away and said, this is amazing. So I'll sing like Neil Diamond and all the people look at me like, how do you know that, you know? I'm a Motown baby. So I have to, and I speak my poem out loud while I'm writing. I say the first line over and over till the second line comes, and I say those two, and the third line comes. So it's kind of a musical process in parallel with the narrative kind of taking shape.
So you have like a motif, and it already informs everything that comes after, once you have that initial sort of phrase.
Yeah, and then you look into it and you say, okay, there's a story here, the story's here. Now how can I make it sound like something I haven't heard before?
And you talked about genre singers, and I've seen some interviews online, and I'm wondering how that, because it seems like there's a well that you draw from. That's why I mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, well, yes, in a way, because I listen to them for the austerity, not for the melody, because it's not melodic. And I love the ballad, and I love those old forms. So I'm fairly formal, really. Often I will go at it formally, and. So to sort of knock some of that back and listen to the real note, what's the real note, what's really going on here, what's the tone? I think tone in poetry often isn't talked enough about, actually. It's much more complex and interesting perhaps than we give it, or than we it just isn't talked about as much as perhaps it might be. And the, you know, like the tuning fork, what's that note, would be a very important aspect of that for me. Seamus for its austerity, I mean, again, reading Herbert, who was apparently, I have no Polish, so I can't tell how austere he was or where I was, but there is, it's a great old teacher for that, to knock some of the frills off your poems, you know. I can be a bit frilly if I let myself. I remember Yvonne Boland saying to me in a workshop when I was, I think it was on my second book, and she said, you write these very beautiful second last lines.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, she was right. And I mean, they weren't very beautiful, but it was a very kind way of saying something very important to me. And I said, how will I fix it? Because I sort of knew what she meant. And she said, rhyme couplets for a week ought to do it. And I love rhyme couplets. So off I went and wrote loads of rhyme couplets. And after she said to me, I didn't think you'd take me seriously. But and the other thing, I mean, I can give you lots of reasons, but the real reason is poetry has always been sung and spoken from the Greeks through the Irish, you know, it's part of the tradition, it's part of the tradition I grew up with.
Around the fire, you know.
Well, the two were together. I mean, there was, usually it was actually, if you couldn't play, you said a poem. So I was the one that didn't play.
I've got this evolution of spoken word course that I teach, and the kids come in because they go, hey, we're going to spit some rhymes. And I go, no, you're going to fail. But it's all about, the basis of it is language as persuasion. I mean, poets, we feel a certain way. When the poem's done, we kind of want you to feel that way. So we talk about snake oil salesmen and evangelists and political and cult speech and all that, you know. It's like the persuasion is at the core of it, you know, and so that when they get that idea of the lineage and that tradition, that ties them into poetry now in a really different way.
Maybe we'll open up to give some widen the circle of questions and conversation. Yeah.
I'm just curious, Patricia, about when you mentioned about the students, you know, and doing that 13 poem, how did that work in terms of shifting their gears?
Oh, they loved it.
As a teacher, you know?
Yeah, because I often will be in the middle of a test or something and go, this isn't doing it. You know, I mean, you can try and follow a textbook for a semester or something, but you also have to be very attuned to the personality of your class. You know, and sometimes whatever's coming up next in the textbook is not them. And so I constantly try to surprise them with things. Say, okay, what have they been writing about now? What have we been talking about? What do I hear them talking about around campus and everything? And try to make it be a real world lesson instead of something that they just, because the minute they open a book, it's like, oh, it's relegated to the book, I hate this, you know. But if I can jump off something, and they just love it when I switch gears right in the middle of a class. In a sentence, sometimes they just go, nah, we're not gonna do this, you know. So they did great. They did, as a matter of fact, that was like, wow. That was some time ago, and I still get the finished poems. You know, some of them finished them, some of them didn't, but they liked that concept. And then you have them concentrating on something else, sometimes other than the narrative, counting the syllables and making sure they have the 13 lines. And that led to some unexpected work because the narrative snuck in while they were doing this other thing.